The first lesson of Unit 2 will be on Rabbinic Judaism of Salonika in the Greek Peninsula. As opposed to Ashkenazi Jewry, which has the rabbi, the Sfaradim have the Chacham, the wise man. So usually he does have rabbinic ordination and is connected or learned in a yeshiva. Sometimes he's just someone who knows prayer well. But for the most part, when we're talking about Chachamim, we're talking about the religious decisors. Now, the community, there's the lay leaders, and then there are the religious leaders. So the religious leaders are headed by the chief rabbi, but the average rabbi is called a Chacham. So there isn't one chief rabbi, there's a committee of three, okay, the triumvirate. And basically, the one who has the most seniority, it becomes the chief rabbi. When someone dies, they add someone, and the number two person becomes the chief rabbi. Obviously, these people are erudite people. They've published halachic works in Jewish law. Why do you have three and not two? Because you have three so that if there's a vote, there's an odd number of people, and there can be a majority decision, which is very significant. And the halachic decision for the Sephardic community of the Sephardic world is not left to one person per se, but it's a group effort, and that has significance. So this structure of the triumvirate also was replicated in other Sephardic communities. It wasn't totally unique to Salonika, but it was the most pronounced amongst Salonican Sephardic Jewry. In Israel, people know about this, but you don't see it so much in the diaspora, because you have regular secular courts in the diaspora. But in Israel, you have a religious court for Jewish life cycle affairs. So primarily marriage and divorce. In other words, the big issue is determining if the person is a bachelor or bachelorette, or if they've been divorced, can they get married? So if are they officially divorced by secular law, by Jewish law? Do they get a get? Do they get they actually have the divorce certificate from a divorce, let's say, court proceeding? So the Beit Din is also three religious dayanim, three religious judges, and they decide all sorts of issues. In Israel, in the modern period, it's limited to divorce and marriage. Again, in marriage, you have to prove that you're a bachelor or bachelorette, and in divorce, it's everything, division of property, who gets custody of the children, etc., etc. So you had all that in Salonika, or in various other Jewish and Sephardic communities in Greece, in the Ottoman Empire, and the Greek Peninsula. But you also had other issues which we don't know about today, aren't aware of, or don't work that way. For example, when people made a business transaction, the actual contract would be a religious contract. Now, the yeshiva system was the Kamponton Iyun system, based on not necessarily Ashkenazi yeshiva type pilpul, debate on everything, but a study of the actual etymology, the root of each word and each concept. And that's how the Bible is interpreted, and that's how Jewish law was interpreted since Spain, since the last century of the of Jewish life in Spain in the late 15th century, and that carried over into Salonika in the 16th, 17th centuries. Eventually that system wore out. The only place today where we have that system was on the island of Jerba, and in the Rabbi Meir Mazuz's yeshiva in Bnei Brak Kisei Rachamim. The Sfaradim have rabbinic responsa, just like the Ashkenazim. In Salonika, you had many rabbinic responsa. The authoritative 16th century expert was the Rashdam, the Medina, and the Darby. In the 19th century, you had like Chaimucho Cohen and Kovo, and other religious decisors. Now, what is a shtar? A shtar is an official document. Okay, so like when a emissary would go traveling, be sent, let's say, from Salonika because there was a fire or because there was an earthquake, and money had to be raised, he went with the shtar, let's say, to London or to Paris, and the shtar was signed by communal lay and religious leaders. It was like an official document. You also had a shtar that was a contract for business that was considered also a rabbinical document, and it was signed by a rabbinical authority. You had so the people on the Beit Din, they also would deal with shtarot, and whereas a responsa is it's a question of a religious issue, and so the answer is considered also part of Jewish law, but it's not from the Beit Din. It's one rabbinical authority being asked a question, making a ruling. So you had Sephardic rabbis in Salonika or other communities. They wrote religious essays. They wrote commentary on the Torah and on the Bible and on prophets, etc., etc. You even had a Bravanel who was in Corfu after the Spanish expulsion for a very short time, and he wrote an essay on one of the books of prophets. Just like Ashkenazim, when a couple was engaged, you had Tnaim. That isn't different. The wording might have been different, though. But what you had in Sephardic tradition was the aricha, the dowry evaluation, and it was usually by an expert of 3 rabbis or appraisers, and it was a religious ceremony. It had a religious law element to the whole process. A Beit Din in America, you don't go to a religious Beit Din before getting married. In Israel, you do, though, and in the Sephardic world, you do. You do, and you did. So, for example, to prove your bachelorhood, you go to a religious Beit Din of 3, and it's like a trial. And or if you're divorced, the divorce has to be official. By Jewish law, you need the Jewish get, the Jewish writ, that it's a religious document. And so, for example, the Beit Din would notice that a Kohen is divorced, and he can't, by Jewish law, he can't get married. Or if someone was a mamzer, a bastard, then the Beit Din would rule them out, or they would find a creative solution. Usually, they would say that they would find a way to show that the marriage of the mother actually didn't exist or wasn't legal. Something that occupied the Sephardic rabbis a lot was what was called Levirate marriage. So if a woman's husband died and she didn't have children, the brother-in-law of the brother of the husband is obligated to marry her and provide to make children with her. But if she didn't want him, that situation is called yivum. If she didn't want him, and then she had to have a ceremony called chalitza, and the woman would hit the man with a shoe 3 times, but it's a whole process. But there are religious debates on yivum and chalitza, which in the Sephardic world were different than in the Ashkenazi world. What you had in Sephardic communal tradition was just like the Ashkenazim, you had circumcision. But amongst the Sephardim, you had the circumcisers' books. It's not an official communal document. It belonged to the circumciser, to the mohel. But the mohel's family would keep these books, these registers of all the births and the circumcisions, and it's a historical document and part of tradition. So, for example, there's a family in Great Neck called Matzel, which has the registers of circumcision for many generations from Yanina. In the early 20th century, they migrated to America, and so they have these circumcision registers. Greek Jewry had, of course, like any chazanut, cantorialship. What's different in Salonika, you have, as other parts of the Ottoman Empire, the music was influenced by Muslim religious liturgical music in terms of the scales, they're called maqams, but also sometimes chazanim and rabbis took tunes from Greek Orthodox priests and monks in Salonika, so that was an additional influence. So you had Sephardic prayer books, which were in Rashi-like typeset, and in Hebrew, intertwined. You had what we'll call machzorim. Amongst Ashkenazi Jewry, the machzor is the holiday festival prayer book. Amongst the Sephardim, the machzor was the specific Iberian religious tradition. So, for example, and we have a specimen of the 1808 Catalan machzor, which was the whole yearly cycle of Sephardic prayer from Catalan, which continued in Salonika in specific congregations. The Ashkenazim only have a week of slichot, of prayers for forgiveness before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but the Sephardim have a whole month of slichot, and in Salonika and Greece you had special slichot, which were different even from Moroccan Jewry, Iraqi Jewry, Persian Jewry, etc., etc. So the Sephardic slichot are different, and they're different than the Romaniot slichot from Western Greece. And then during the year, the Sephardim would get up early on Shabbat morning or in the wee hours of Friday night and say bakashot. These are prayers for forgiveness, and they take on their own liturgical nature, but various parts of Sephardic Jewry in the Greek Peninsula, in Turkey, and of course Aleppo and Jewry and Morocco, they have these bakashot. So this is all part of the religious cycle. This is all part of Rabbinic Judaism and religious Sephardic Judaism.